All right, perfect. Devin, thanks for joining the Retention Edge podcast. I guess let's kick it off right from the start. Give us a quick intro on yourself, your background a little bit, and kind of what you're working on right now.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, first of all. Name's Devyn Merklin. I cut my teeth in e-commerce pretty young. And when I say pretty young, I think nowadays, like, I have people that I know that have, like, started when they're, like, 12. I started when I was in, like, college at an apparel
Mm,
company. And I just fell in love with, like, the creation, like, being able to, like, create something, like, in your, like, dorm room, in your apartment,
mhm,
and then sell it online is, like, super, like, appealing to me. I was like, "This is awesome." So, I ran with that for, like, a couple of years, and then, as you get towards walking across that graduation stage, the reality sets in, and you're like, "Oh, man, I gotta get a job." So, I applied for, like, 80 different, jobs, like, no joke. I think it was, like, 88 exactly, and I heard back from 3, and one of them was, like, multi-level marketing, like MLM. So I was like, "Nah, I'm not gonna do that." Other one was, it was, like, being, like, the marketing not like, marketing specialist for, like, a crawl space company. Like, they wanted you to, like,
mhm,
interview, like, some of their customers, get videos, create graphics, that kinda stuff. And then the other one was really interesting to me. It was, for an individual named Doctor Blake Livingood. And the job posting, the very first line was, "This is not a job," like, job in
mhm.
all caps. I was like, "I wanna go see what's up with this one." So, I ended up going to the crawl space one first, and, I was like, "This is just" they put me through all this, like, corporate stuff, and I was like, "This doesn't feel good. I guess this is what it is, right? Coming out of college is what's supposed to be."
Yep.
And then I went to, meet Doctor Livingood, which was, like, in my hometown, like, where I grew up before I went to college. And we met at a Starbucks. He told me not to dress up, but I still wore a button up because like, "This is a test."
Yeah.
So we met at a Starbucks, and, it was just super casual. He's like, "I've got this clinic, I'm building this thing, and I wanna find somebody to help build it with me." And at that time, I told him this later. I was like, "I would've worked for free 'cause this sounded like the most fun that you could
Pure
ever have."
startup vibes right there, right?
Big time,
Yep.
and the vision behind it, the mission was so powerful. Like, his father, was diagnosed with Cogan syndrome, which at the time, there's only 250 cases documented in history, and, long story short, I won't tell his whole story, but he ended up, working with his dad to get him healthy again. So he came off, like, 15 different medications, avoided some surgeries, and got, like, his life back. Like, now he's not, like, chained to the prescriptions and, like, the surgeries. Now he could, like, go bike and fish again, all this kinda stuff. And he wanted to take the stuff that he taught his dad and that he was teaching people at his clinic and bring it online. And I was all here for it. I was like, I'm big into health and fitness. At the time, I thought I knew something. Learning from him, I learned a lot more. And I was like, this is an amazing message. Like, I want to help get this out to people. So that's where the story kind of starts. It's like it was just pure startup vibes. We're in a coffee shop working from sun up to sundown. Like, we worked at a Earth Fair coffee shop because I don't think they closed until like 11 p.m. I was like, okay, we can work until 11 p.m.
Yep.
And we're just like trying to figure it out. For 2.5 years, it was like that. We're testing different kinds of funnels, offers, all this kind of stuff, in like the supplement space. And then it started to take off. Everything that we put in was starting to work. And we grew that company from zero, just in that coffee shop, to over $50 million in annual revenue in less than 4 years. It got us on like Inc. 5000, sixth fastest growing company of 2022. We broke things. We made a lot of cool things. We helped a lot of people. It was a really fast and fun ride. So that's kind of like the background of like where I came from and why I'm so like into e-commerce and stuff, to
Yeah,
this
so
day.
you kind of cut your teeth like actually doing the job, right? Like doing the daily grind. And I guess what are the biggest takeaways that you got from that 4-year journey, I guess you would say? And what have you kept with you going into kind of Xscale now?
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway I think I had, when you're learning and when you're kind of figuring this kind of stuff out, and that's the key word, figuring this out, is you're watching people like you and I on like this podcast or like some marketing guru, and you're like, oh man, I gotta like listen to them do exactly what they do and like copy and paste. And that's like true to an extent because they can cut down like that term, like your 10,000 hours, like just learn from
Mhm.
somebody that's done it before. They can cut that down, but they're only going to be able to get you from their own perspective, their own personal experience, like 60 to about like 80% there. But it's the last 20, like last 10% that takes like a different kind of muscle of just figuring stuff out, no matter what it is. Like somebody can only get you, it doesn't matter what they've done, they can only get you a certain percentage of the way. And the biggest lesson that I took from all of that, it was a fast, crazy, fun ride, was the muscle to figure something out. There's the answer isn't always readily available. It just takes a lot of just whatever it takes. I want to figure this out and figure out that last 10 to 20%.
That makes sense. And so did you guys use any agencies when you were kind of scaling that business? Agencies for ads, agency for social media, or anything like that?
Yeah, and that's a big part of why Xscale exists now. So when we were growing that company in the beginning, it was a lot of figuring stuff out. Like it was myself, Dr. Livingood, and then another individual named Dan who ran the social media buying. And you wear a bunch of different hats in that kind of environment. And as we started to grow, we're like, well, we're growing really freaking fast. To hire an individual and to train them up could take months. Like I
Yeah.
see like it takes about 90 days to get somebody like fully up to speed, and to teach them on the brand and then the process. You can cut down that time by hiring an agency, but the problem with an agency is that they have their own SOPs. They're running on an agency model. That's its own business model. So they have to do things that's right for their business, which is totally understandable. The problem is when you're growing so fast and you have a methodology for growth, trying to get that agency and that contractor or contractors to work in that same kind of vein that you're found for growth. That was the
Hmm.
problem that we found, is trying to pull all that together. And that's why Xscale exists now. Because going through that, I was like, this was really freaking challenging. Like, why isn't there a entity or a partner like pulling agencies and contractors together in order to get them to help the brand grow? Like pull
Hmm.
those business models, take the unique things from that contract or that agency, pull them together and get everybody moving towards growth.
And how did you solve for it at Dr. Livingood? Like what did you guys end up doing that kind of solved for those core issues again before you got started with Xscale, right?
Yeah, the first thing not every like you can't do this with like every agency and every contractor. It takes like the right agency that's like open to listening. Like really big agencies, they're not gonna sacrifice their processes for your business because they've got their own business to run. Totally understandable. So it takes the right agency. And so what we found is that if we develop the system and the process that we found for growth and we can just plug that agency in that doesn't deviate too far from their processes, it gets the system rolling and allows them to work within our system of growth without them having to do too many extra things that hurts their system, right? You don't want to it's like a give and take type of thing. You want to work with like an agency or a contractor that is willing to like work with you a little bit and not just stay in their own SOP. So it's a little bit of give and take, but us developing the system and then plugging in the right agencies to run within that system was how we kind of figured that out.
And so how are you solving for these different issues now with Xscale? What were the key learnings you took away, and what are the key focuses of Xscale that kind of differentiate your old agency experiences for and kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah, so when we engage with brands, it's a very loose conversation, right? So I'm a huge component for what's don't change what's working, invest in what's working, and then figure out how to fill in the gaps, right? So with Xscale, and this is controversial from like the agency model. It's like the agency model, it's like you want to come in because you believe you're going to do better than XYZ agency. At Xscale, we don't want to do that. Like we're tied to your growth. So if that agency is doing good work, We don't want to replace that agency. We want that agency to continue to do good work. So when we jump in and work with brands, we just go through a full assessment and understand their entire business, what's working, what's not working. And then we come up with the plan and also the proposal of like, hey, this rockstar agency you have over here, they might be a little overpriced, but they're freaking crushing it. Keep them. And I think, we can plug in these areas in order to get your business performing a little bit better. This agency, they're crushing it for ads, but hey, they need like funnels and landing pages and stuff built. We can fill in that gap. And if, economically that doesn't make sense, let's point you in the direction that, you can economically make that happen so that agency can perform so much better. So that's how we kind of figure this out. It's like, you don't want to take away from that agency model because whatever they're doing is working well. You want to replace the bad ones, keep the good ones, but also have that brand and their goals in mind and how to plug in the right pieces to facilitate the growth and the goals that they're trying to hit.
If you had to give, someone's listening and they're considering agencies right now, or they have existing agencies, what advice would you give them to actually truly assess the performance of an agency that they're working with right now? And I know that's a broad question because there's so many different verticals for what agencies can do, but maybe on kind of more of a general level, like what would you look at to be like, okay, this is a successful relationship versus we need to cut ties and we need to kind of go explore for a different one.
Yeah, and this one's yeah, like you said, it's a broad answer. It depends on the agency, but I'll narrow it down to advertising agencies since they are pretty much the most common within e-commerce and the ones
For
I've had
sure.
the most experience with. When it comes to an advertising agency, I found when working with brands, a lot of them hold the advertising agency, the media buying agency, to metrics that they don't have full control over. So it's your key metric. It's like ROAS, cost per acquisition, average order value, like that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, but that advertising agency doesn't have full control over ROAS, nor do they have full control over cost per acquisition. Say they're in charge of creative and the media buying, they can do really engaging creative for CPMs and like CPCs and that kind of stuff. And they can find the right like audiences and segments to improve those metrics. But when it comes to the cost to acquire a customer, this commonly gets related to advertising, but it's actually a mix of advertising and what's going on your store or landing page. So to hold an advertising agency specifically to like CPA or ROAS, you're kind of like tying one hand behind their back because they can't do most of them can't do what's necessary to make that landing page convert or make that funnel have a higher average order value to influence ROAS. So when it comes to engaging with advertising agencies and understanding which ones work well and which ones don't, get real granular on the things that they can control, where you're at, where you want to be, and within reason, hold them to those goals. Don't hold them to the metrics that are shared between multiple departments.
That makes complete sense. And when a what's a simple couple piece of advice for someone now looking for an agency, trying to evaluate whether it's at let's stick with the advertising since that's kind of the core. What would you tell them to kind of look out for and make sure to get whatever boxes checked off to make sure they're kind of making the right decision?
Yeah, when you're any agency, contractor, partner hire, it's kind of the same methodology, right? Like if you want to cut through and understand if they're a good fit, you won't know until you've worked with them for like that 90-ish days and sometimes even 6 months, right? Because it takes a lot of trial and error. And I apologize. Let me backstep and then I'll get back to the answer. Um,
Yeah.
you like, for example, if you've had your brand for 4 years, it has taken you 4 years to understand your brand up until this point. If you hire a contractor, an agency, in-house person, your expectation should be, I can give them a lot of information to cut down that 4 years, but it shouldn't be this person's going to come on or this entity is going to come on and turn my business around in 30 days. You hear
Mhm.
some stories of like agencies, contractors, hires being able to do that, but have a little bit of grace in that time period to understand if they actually can turn your business around. I
I
usually look
guess
at
it's
90
similar
days.
to your 10% example from before, right? Like the learnings can only go so much, and then that last 10, 20%, whatever it is, You kind of have to just do the work and figure it out for yourself, sort of, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when you're hiring them, it's like let them do their thing, let them figure it out, right? It's going to take some time. It took you 4 years to figure out your brand. Give them a grace period. Give them like 90 days. Don't give them like all of the leash, but 90 days is a pretty good time period. But when it comes to selecting one to try and get it a little bit sooner, understanding than that 90 days, it's ask them simple questions like who else do you work with and like what is their kind of niche, and if they work with brands that aren't inside your niche, they're not a good fit for you. Just move on, find another one. There's a whole bunch out there. um Understand like who's going to be on your account, what's their background, do they have like experience within brands that are similar to mine, because too many, like, you jump on these agency calls and you're talking to the salesperson, for example, and the salesperson's like, yeah, we can do that, like, we've worked with this brand before, blah blah blah, but who's actually going to be on my account and what's their background? How long have they been with the company? What brands have they worked with? Like it's all these like they kind of seem like obvious questions, but like a lot of brands don't ask them. Ask those questions and understand who you're actually working with, and if they understand your brand to help cut down that that 4 year window that it took you to understand this, and cut down that 90 days a little bit.
Makes sense. And so obviously this is the Retention Edge podcast, right? So we focus around retention, and obviously as you were scaling Dr. Livingood and even in your current role right now, uh, obviously a large part of what you do revolves around customer retention. So I guess let's start going back from your first kind of experience in e-commerce. What were the biggest mistakes you made along the way when you were trying to figure out the retention side of the business, right? Because you don't get to fill it $50 million a year in the health and wellness space without at least good retention, if not great retention, right? And so I think we break it up into two separate camps because obviously there's the product side of things. If the product doesn't work, if it's awful, if it tastes bad, whatever the situation is, it's nothing you can do from the retention side. So obviously you need to have a good product. But even a lot of great products, those businesses still fail at the end of the day because they can't figure out the retention side. They can't figure out how to get the customers to come back consistently enough, right? So uh, outside of like having a great product from a tactical perspective, what were the key learnings and the key mistakes you kind of made along the way?
Yeah, and let me preface this by saying, when you reached out, and why I was like so keen, like I think I gave you a one-word response. It was like something like, "Heck yeah, let's do this." Um,
Yeah.
is I think your podcast and what you're focusing on is going to be wildly successful because this is how every business needs to think moving forward. It's retention. Probably like early days of e-commerce, it was like average order value and ROAS, like that. That's not the
Yeah.
game anymore. As the barrier of entry into this field lowers, the game is going to be how good is my product and how good am I at keeping customers buying my stuff. Like that, it's going to be so important coming in your position in like the most perfect spot. And I love that you're diving into this niche and talking about this stuff and getting people informed. From my experience, the biggest mistake that I made was just that. It was just focusing on how do I get the most money out of this person right away. It's still important for like the economics of your business to make sure that you have like a positive return on your investment, like within advertising. But it's not the most important thing for long-term growth. So the biggest mistake that I made, like specifically in supplements, like there's this weird thing that happens, and you'll see it in other niches too, is that if you sell somebody something, the best next upsell is just selling them more of what they bought. So in supplements in particular, like I learned from Ed O'Keefe. I don't know if anybody watching is familiar with him. He's like the OG of the supplement space. Ed O'Keefe and like Russell Brunson. It's like they buy like one bottle of your supplement, upsell them to six more. And then if they don't take six, downsell them to three more. And then if they do take six, upsell them to 12 more. And when I heard this, I was like, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. That is so, there's no creativity in that at all. And then I was like, okay, let me get over my own ego here and test it out. And it worked. It was amazing. But that was the mistake that I made was I was selling these customers like everything that they would need for the next year right away. And I wouldn't
Right.
see them come back because I was just focused on how do I get that positive like return on my investment right away. I wasn't focused on how do I create longevity within my business model. like there's a time and a place for that, right? And I'm not saying like don't do that, but don't make it your entire business model because there's no longevity in it. When I switched my focus to how do I keep a like my focus went to lifetime value. And when I looked at like what is my value after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and so on and so forth, that's when the mindset started to shift a little bit, where I could then compete with bigger brands and say, okay, I can spend this much to acquire a customer because I know that they're going to stick with me for 30, 60, 90 days if I get them onto subscription. And then I can also build in different kind of like offers and funnels and things of that nature to introduce people to the brand, give them the information that they're looking for, help them apply it, and then supplement them along the way. I'm building a relationship with those customers. They're more likely to come back around. So it got me away from this game that we're all taught from like a direct marketer perspective to play like how much can I get out of this person right away? Instead, the mindset changed is how long can I keep this customer over time? So it really turned into like relationship building and making sure that I was always in front of that customer and giving more than we're actually taking right out of the gates.
It's funny how the dumbest and most simple advice ends up usually being the correct advice. And it's just like, I feel like it's almost universally true. Everyone's always looking for that secret hack and that unique hack. And here's this little tip that you can do, and it's going to 8x your business and, all these little things, and you could never try before. And then it ends up being something just dumb, simple as give them more of what they already want versus trying to move them into all these other things that they haven't tried yet. And, and then once they trust your brand a little bit more down the line, then, okay, let's open up all these other options that you can kind of consider too, right? So I always find that funny how it's just the stupidest advice at the end of the day. And we see this in our business too, in the mobile app space. When people are like, oh, I don't know how to like get people back to my app and everything, and I have to figure out the perfect flow to create. And I'm just like, just send out a general push notification reminding them that you're there, and do that first. It'll work great, and then continue to experiment, but just keep it dead simple. Let's not, overcomplicate things over and over and over and over again, where it takes 3 months to plan this out when we can launch something this week. Try, iterate on it, right?
Mhm.
Speed of execution at the end of the day. Uh, and so now in your role or not in your role with the company you started with Xscale, how are you walking brands through retention and training them up to kind of see things that way? Because I work with brands every single day, and I still run into the difficulty of trying to convince them that retention is where you're going to grow your business, and just the endless spending on Facebook ads and Google ads and everything like that, not focusing on the retention side, is a losing game. Maybe not, maybe still not right now, but definitely within the next couple of years, right? Facebook ads keep getting more expensive. Email open rates actually are kind of getting lower and lower every single year, generally speaking, right? So there's all these different headwinds that brands are facing. So what are you kind of doing to get brands to see the light? I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. So when we usually work with brands, it's usually brands that, we work with some brands that are high six figures, but there's people that we staff on accounts and that has an expense. And so we don't want to, if you're doing high six figures or mid six figures, that expense might be a huge, expense that, hurts
Yeah.
your growth at the end of the day. That goes against what we're trying to do. So we usually work with brands that are like the low seven, mid seven figures, right? The reason that we work with these brands is because we can directly talk to the owners. And the owners are the easiest to talk to about this thing because they started that brand for a reason. When we're forced to talk to like the marketing director or the name marketing specialist here, the problem becomes they have a number or they have certain objectives that they have to hit, and so they
Hmm.
utilize us in order to try and do that, but they're not looking at the longer term growth of the business. When we have the opportunity to work with owners, it's a little bit easier to get this concept that I'm about to talk about to them and get them moving in the right direction. So I call this IAS, and this is exactly how we set up Livingood Daily. We didn't intentionally do this. It wasn't until like we were growing and I looked back and I was like, oh, that's interesting that we did that. It was just relationship building. And you see this in every other business. So when I explain this, like any successful business, just go look at them. This is what they do. It's information, the application of information, and supplementation. And so when we have a problem as consumers, we are generally looking for information to help solve that problem. As a consumer, we think, oh, that information solves the problem, but it usually doesn't. That's why we get in this hamster wheel of like Dr. Google and scrolling through Facebook and all this. But if you can provide information to the consumer, it starts to build trust in a relationship with them. Not a lot, like on a scale of 0 to 100, it probably gets you to a 5, but at least you got your foot in the door. They know, oh yeah, I got this good piece of information from XYZ, and maybe I'll go back to XYZ again to get more information. But then the next step is application. So if you understand that a consumer has a problem, they gathered that information from you. If you can then help them solve that problem through applying that information, they have the utmost trust with you. So like weight loss, for example, every year it's a cycle. People are always trying to lose weight and they try like Atkins and like all these crazy diets, keto and all this stuff. But if you can help that person get the thing that they want, help them lose weight, they're like, I don't want to try anything else. Like, this is the person, this is the entity that's helping me get the result that I want. I just want to listen to this person. And then you just have to stay in front of them. So then it's supplementation. So it's like play on words for like supplement brands, but also it's like every other brand, like a software or an application, for example. It's just staying in front of them, constantly feeding them so that they stay with you and build that relationship up and up. So you went from a trust meter from 0 to 100, you went from 5 to probably like 60 to like 80 if you can go through that process. So when we have the opportunity to work with brand owners, we're able to get that methodology over to them and they're able to adopt that because they started that brand for a reason. And we usually work with brands that have a very strong like mission, vision, values, like tied to why they're doing what they're doing. And so when they understand that, it trickles down and allows us to change all of the marketing in our favor to get the result that we want to get at the end of the day, which is growing the brand. So we're able to build in the funnels and the offers that bring people through the door from information. We're able to build in the application pieces and then the supplementation pieces. So that's how we kind of work with brands to try and get that retention piece built into their business.
You said a couple different interesting things there, and I'm trying to decide which direction to go. But I'm thinking, okay, so first, something at the beginning, what you said, you were like, okay, no, with six-figure brands, it's hard to make it work because obviously, the costs involved and everything else, you kind of need them to figure it out. It's interesting because we kind of see a similar thing where if a brand isn't, typically isn't at least figures or something like that, it's almost like retention doesn't matter to them at that point. And it's like it's just acquisition, acquisition, acquisition to a large extent because at the end of the day, yeah, you can try to retain these customers, but if you don't grow fast enough or you don't grow your revenue enough, the business doesn't even really make sense at that point. So I'm curious, like from your experience, where do you see that where do you see brands typically tilting towards? Okay, I've been doing acquisition and focusing on this for X amount of time now. Now I need to flip the switch and start thinking about retention. And this is kind of a two-part question. When do you see them typically doing this? But when do you think they should actually start focusing on it instead? Because oftentimes it might be too late by the time they start focusing on it, right?
Mhm. Probably around 3 to 4 million is when they start to, oh, okay, lifetime value, and I can keep the same customer over a long period of time. Right? That's usually where I've seen it. And then where should they start focusing on it? In the very beginning, honestly, in the very beginning, but it shouldn't take up majority of your focus. It should be
Okay.
a piece of your system, but then like say that's the 20%, your 80% should be figuring out how the heck do I get to 7 figures? To give you an example, I own a automotive like parts brand. It's called Karma Speed. And this was the game. Like this was just a hobby business, a lifestyle business. I met an influencer a few years ago. I was like, "Dude, you're building the same car that I'm building, and you got an e-commerce store. Can I help you out?" He's like, "Heck yeah." And so it was just like we spend like a couple hours a week on it. And we're like, "How do we like grow this thing?" And so we're focusing on like how do we bring new customers in? And so what I'm trying to get to is that you can get to seven figures pretty easily just by nailing one product and getting new customers to buy that product. If you want to go past that 3 4 million, you got to figure out how to keep your same customers there for a long time. So with this brand, we just turned over products, different kind of offers, things, and all this kind of stuff, and like boom, it was like overnight. It was like a 30K month to 150K month. Like right after that, once we found that right product and just scaled it, a bunch of new customers came in. Then the game is how do you keep those customers coming back? But the lack of focus in the beginning of building in those pieces of retention now creates a problem now where you have to almost slow down that new customer cost per acquisition because they're coming in and just bouncing out, and
Mhm.
you're trying to figure out what is that retention piece. But if you just started with that and spent like 20% of your time trying to figure that out, once you've nailed that 80%, then it just falls into place and then you're able to compound that growth. So that was like unknowingly Livingood Daily. It's like we used recharge for like subscription revenue, and we just had it turning in the background. Didn't take up a lot of our time. And then when we cracked the code through ads and got a bunch of people through like we're we probably did like 400K in 1 month through just one funnel. It was just a one-time offer. We noticed, wow, subscriptions are starting to grow passively in the background, and that's allowing us to grow the entire company. So,
Okay.
long story
Getting
short, I
that
would say use
repeatable revenue essentially allows you to try new things, spend more money on ads because you're not spending that money on instead of spending that money on or and getting that revenue from ads, you're suddenly getting all that money from subscriptions. So you can reinvest that money into more ad spend or more people on your team or more inventory or whatever, whatever the situation might be.
exactly, exactly. So you want to focus on it in the beginning, but the main focus needs to be how the heck do I bring in new customers and get them into this machine?
So now let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to focus on retention. I liked Devon's system and how he kind of like laid it out. I'm going to start implementing this. Obviously, implementing something without tracking essentially is completely useless at the end of the day because if you're not measuring your results, it's basically just invisible. So, what are the metrics that you're looking at or that the brand should look at to know and understand is what I'm doing working for all three parts of your system, right? Because it can't just be one number at the end of the day. I assume there's different numbers for each kind of part of the journey.
Mhm. So there's a lot of different KPIs that you need to focus on as you grow a business, but the most important ones are the ones that I'll speak to right now. Um, what I would say, the very first thing, there's different apps and different softwares and things for tracking, kind of like retention, subscription, all that kind of stuff, and acquisition. Um, what I would say before you lean too heavily on those, understand your numbers on a spreadsheet level. So like what is my landing cogs, what are my processing fees per order, how much am I paying in taxes, how much is the software cost, like all of that should be factored into your cost to acquire a customer, right? If you can get that granular, then data is just relative. I've been on the data side and hear from people like, oh, this doesn't match up with what I see on Meta, and Meta doesn't match up with what I see on Triple Whale. Like it's
Yeah.
all relative, but
Hmm.
the only way you understand the truth is if you know dollars in, dollars out on a spreadsheet level. And then you can go to Meta and see where it's off. You can go to Triple Whale, Hyros, whatever the application might be to figure it out, right? But you need to start on that granular level. So I'd say start there. And then those main KPIs I'd be focusing on is how much does it cost me to acquire a new customer, whether you're doing ads or whatever else? How much does it cost me to acquire a new customer? How much is that customer worth after 30, 60, and 90 days? I would stop there. So I would say like look at LTV, but LTV can be misleading. So you want to look at LTV on a 30, 60, 90-day level. So there you've got this is how much it's costing me to acquire a new customer, like real granular. You factor in processing fees, all that kind of stuff. This is how much they're worth after a 30, 60, 90-day timeline. And then how much are they worth like immediately? So that's kind of like that ROAS element, that average order value. Like how much profit am I making off of them? If you can get those three metrics kind of dialed in, then you know, okay, for every new order that I make, this is how much I'm going to make 30, 60, 90. And then when I get this customer, this is how much they're going to be worth immediately. So I can optimize that to bring in more profitability so I can
Mm.
spend a little bit more, or I can bring that down if I'm really trying to scale. Right. So those are the kind of the three metrics that I'd say you need to be focusing on, especially when it comes to trying to grow a business.
And you've kind of slightly mentioned some tools here or there that that at least you guys used at Dr. Livingood or that are kind of around in the e-commerce system right now. What are the tools that you're using, that your brand's using, or that even that you most recommend for different brands to use to kind of focus on the retention side of the business?
On the retention side of the business, so I'm in the supplement space primarily.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll couple this with a story. Um, and I'll just stick to one because they're here, they're watching, and I feel like people get shiny object syndrome and they start running
Hmm.
out different applications. But if you're here, you're watching, you know what to do. Um, this story that I'm about to tell, when we were growing, we had a lot of subscription revenue coming in. I think we had maybe 1 million, $2 million a month in subscription revenue at that time. And we were on an application called Recharge. And Recharge is huge. They do a bunch of different things, like a bunch of crazy stuff. And they came back around, and Shopify is going through some changes and all this kind of stuff. And they said, well, we need to make your contract a little bit higher. And we're like, oh, heck no. And so what was happening around that time, this is where about 2021 is where retention started to get a little bit more like there's I guess vendors focusing more on it. So all these little like subscription applications started popping up. And so we found one called Loop subscriptions that was pretty good. Like they were just starting out. And so being that we're making about 1 million, $2 million a month in just subscription revenue, we needed to find a partner that we could really like make that work. And I'm going to cut the story short, but we ended up migrating over to Loop subscriptions because they were able to adhere to everything that we needed to do from a sales process perspective. Love that application from a supplement subscription perspective. But what I would say, like a little lesser known one, would probably be something like Checkout Champ is a really good one as well. Not a lot of people know what Checkout Champ is, but it's a great tool for bringing in new customers to drop into like things like Shopify and kind of like Klaviyo and get them into subscriptions. Um, so yeah, I wanted to keep that. I was trying to confine that answer a
Yeah.
little bit just because I'm very aware that people get shiny object syndrome and want to go check out new softwares and that kind of stuff. So
And so you actually brought up something around like the costs of these different ones. Klaviyo's the biggest one in email, or like there's all these different tools that are the big ones, and then there's all the new competitors like Loop that might charge less and give you 90% of what you can get with Recharge. And how do you kind of evaluate all these different tools and going to like the market leaders versus these little Loop startups that maybe not they're not a startup anymore, but maybe they are closer to one kind of at the time? And how did you go through evaluating that, trusting it, and then really deciding from a perspective of like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be paying 40% more with Recharge, but there's that trust factor there because everyone's using them. Like, what are your thoughts around that?
that's the question that I love. Okay, so um, I don't care what the application is, whether it's Recharge, Loop subscription, Checkout Chain, Shopify, BigCommerce, whatever it might be. But the person or the company, the software that you're working with, they're listening to you. They're not just throwing you into a system. Like if you've got a business and you've got an idea on how to make retention better or make whatever it be better, and you can voice that to the company, and they're listening to you and then make those changes. It might not be immediately. They're a company too. They got their own things going on. But they're listening to you and they put it on their roadmap, and then eventually they get to it. that's the type of application that I want to work with, right? I don't care what it is. Like they all have like your tech stack is not your answer for growing a $50 million business. So that's why I was kind of like reserved in that question that you asked me
Mhm.
before, because I don't want to say too many softwares and people are, oh, I gotta get this. You want to find the right people and the right I guess company that's going to listen to you and change things and make things better based on your feedback.
And I guess that's a good point too, right? Because there's small companies that won't do that, even though they probably should. And then there's large companies that the entire reason they've grown from the start is because they do listen to their customers. They what most companies won't be able to just instantly implement things, especially a bigger company, but they listen, they plan out, they figure it out, they communicate with with you, let you know what's going on, and then kind of over time, whether it's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the line, they kind of get it implemented or something like that, right? So I guess from a company size perspective, it doesn't really matter. It's just like you said, listening at the end of the day and being willing to take that feedback, not insultingly or critically, but as like a, oh, this would make the experience so much better at the end of the day, right? Again, this whole podcast focuses on retention. If you had kind of some last words for advice or anything like that for anyone listening, whether they're a six-figure brand, I'd say on the low end, maybe someone doing around $1 million a year or just less than that, to a mid to high seven-figure brand, like what's kind of the general advice that you want them to take away from this?
Yeah, and it's not like a tactical answer. It's build relationships with your customers. Every like, don't get me wrong. I love like exploring different kind of technologies and tactics and strategies. Like I love talking about that stuff too. But at the end of the day, every step you make, think about how this is going to affect the relationship that you have with the person on the other side. And if it positively affects the relationship, then the retention just comes, right? Like if you think about, I had an old football coach in high school, compared everything to dating, and some of it is rubbed off on me. If you think about like your business or what you're doing and the customers or the people you're here to serve as just a date, going out to a nice dinner, that's your business isn't going to be around for a while. But if you think about how do I turn this into a marriage and do the right things and listen and change and do all the things that you would do essentially when it comes to a long-term relationship, that's how you nail retention. Don't just focus on the strategies and the tactics and all that kind of stuff, but like that's the feedback that I'd give is any tactic or strategy or anything that you're looking to do, just have that relationship in mind. Like, how is this going to affect my relationship long term with this end user?
I love that. I'm gonna use that as an analogy from now on myself. Awesome, man. So look, I appreciate you doing this. If anyone's listening to this and they're like, Devyn sounds freaking awesome, I want to hear more from him. Where can they come across you? Where can they find you? Where would you love them to reach out to?
Yeah, just go to thexscale.com. There's some links up at the top. You can join our free mastermind. I'm in there going live talking about random stuff, cool strategies that we're seeing in marketing. If you're interested in working with us, you can hit the growth call button and jump on a sales call where we're try and pitch you or pitch you away. So just being real, we're all here to play the game of business. But if you want to learn more, just go to the website and take it from there.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Devyn. I appreciate you doing this, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate you.